So the story of Joseph actually covers 14 chapters in the book of Genesis. So let's remind ourselves a little bit of the Joseph story and the context before we get into this morning's passage. Joseph, as you might remember, is one of 12 brothers, actually the second to the youngest, and the favorite son to be born of the favorite wife of his father Jacob. If this already sounds a bit dysfunctional to you, it's only because it is. Jacob then goes on to show his favoritism to his second young, born to his favorite wife, by giving Joseph, and Joseph alone, a coat of many colors. At least that's what we were taught in Sunday school and reinforced by Donnie Osmond on the Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat stage. And now I get to ruin the story for you. A coat of many colors was actually a mistranslation of the 17th century King James Bible. We now know, because of scholarship, that Hebrew descriptor of the coat is not that it had colors, it could have, but it literally says that his father gave Joseph a coat with long sleeves. And that's actually better for the story, because you can't work in a robe that has long sleeves. Robes with long sleeves, you see, were not worn by the workers, they were worn by the managers. In other words, Jacob said to his son, "You don't have to work like all your other brothers. Enjoy your robe with long sleeves. Enjoy your tuxedo with tails." Now, all of that favoritism would be hard to take in and of by itself, but to top off this paternal favoritism, Joseph is also given to bragging. He knows he's the favorite son, and now he knows that he has a gift of being given and interpreting dreams. In fact, there was one day where he was sitting under the tree, watching his brothers work, he enjoying his robe with long sleeves. And he shared a dream with his family then that they would all one day bow down before him. He was hard to take. So one day, the brothers met a band of Ishmaelites, and they smell an opportunity to sell their baby brother into slavery for cash. Everybody would win. They would get cash, Joseph would be gone. And that's exactly what they do. They take that coat of long sleeves and they dip it into animal's blood. And they tell old man Jacob that his favorite son, born to his favorite wife, was killed and attacked by wild animals. Problem solved. But what happens is that Joseph becomes a servant in Pharaoh's house in Egypt. And through more plot twists than a John Grisham novel, Pharaoh ends up making Joseph second in command over all of Egypt. He now gets to wear lots of robes with long sleeves. When a famine hits the land, it's Joseph who's responsible for relief. His brothers, who have all but forgotten him, are sent to Egypt to buy food. And as a result, the same brothers who sold Joseph into slavery now stand before their younger brother, and just as the dream predicted, they now bow before their younger brother, ruler of Egypt. The key is that in this moment, Joseph recognizes who they are, but they don't recognize who Joseph is. It's a one-way mirror. And Joseph gives them food. Now, I told you Joseph was the second youngest. The youngest born to the family is Benjamin, also born to Jacob's favorite wife. So Benjamin and Joseph are full-blooded brothers, you see. And so in the baby's Benjamin sack, Joseph hides a silver cup. The brothers leave Egypt. They don't know why this foreigner gave them food, but he did. Let's just sign and get out of here. They don't know that they're carrying the silver cup that Joseph had hidden. And just as they get to the edge of town, Joseph sends troops after them with word that his cup is gone. He has it on good word that they stole his silver cup. Imagine that they would do that after all of that Egypt had done for these foreigners. So, whoever is found to have the stolen silver cup will become Pharaoh's slave. The others are free to go home. The cup, of course, is found in Benjamin's sack, the baby. So he must become Pharaoh's slave, and the others are free to go. But they can't, they won't, and they don't. They beg for Benjamin's life. An older brother, Judah, pleads that Joseph might take him instead of the baby. Let the baby go home. And with that, Joseph can't take it anymore. He commands that the room be cleared. The only people that can stay are these 11 Israelites. Now, in the room only are 12. And Joseph turns to them and he takes off the mask and he says, I am he. I am Joseph, your brother. And as we heard, Joseph wailed so loudly that it just echoes through every nook and cranny of that Egyptian palace. Don't be afraid, he tells them. I'm not going to take revenge. God is working through all of this. And they hugged and they cried. And when that meeting is over, those brothers make the fastest trip back to Canaan ever recorded in the history of camel travel. They run into Jacob's tent. They yell loudly into his aged, deaf ears, Father, your son Joseph is alive. Can you hear me? Yes, Joseph, you heard me correctly. Joseph is alive. We found him. I mean, he found us. Whatever. Joseph is alive. And Jacob just won't believe it. They go on to tell the story blow by blow, and Jacob finally says, I have to believe it to see it. So everybody trudges back to Egypt again, and the whole family is reunited. A father who was convinced that his son was dead learns that his son is alive. Now, this is a very moving story. I encourage you to read all 14 chapters to fill in all the details. But the story offers even more than what I just told you. Because if we move the camera up, we see that it's not just a story about Joseph, it's also a story about the entire human family that God is building. Yes, it's a story about Joseph, but on the next level, can't you see how, too, it's a story of salvation? The dead one is alive, 12 brothers, 12 disciples. We even have betrayal with a piece of silver. In the end, the abandoned one, the one that was left in the deadly grasp of slave traders, is not only alive, but the one in power. And he offers food. Joseph, Jesus, see the parallels? Joseph in jail with a linen robe, Jesus in the tomb with a linen shroud. It just goes on and on. Joseph in the royal palace commanding the distribution of life-giving grain. Jesus seated at the right hand of God the Father, giving us heavenly food at every celebration of communion. And the most striking parallel between the Joseph and Jesus story in both the Genesis and the gospel story, forgiveness. You have to wonder, don't you, how Joseph did this? How did Joseph feel when he saw these brothers again who hated him? Don't forget, these are brothers who hated him so much that they sold him. They made him dead to them. Can you imagine being ripped out of your community, being sold for a price, shackled and dragged away, screaming out by the people who said they loved you to save you and they don't? And then they don't stop there. They covered it all up with a lie. They told their father that Joseph was just as much as dead. When Joseph saw those brothers standing before him, didn't all of that have to come roaring back again? And you have to wonder what he did with the past. How did he dismiss it? He could have enslaved them. The power dynamic had reversed. Before, the brothers had all the power. Now he has all the power. He could have laughed at their request. You dare a foreigner come and stand before me? We have an Egypt first policy here. We're in a famine too, you know. He doesn't do any of that. He does not treat them as their sins deserved. Instead, he gives them food and provisions and treasures and says, you can go home, because the past is past. How did he do that? I have no idea, other than to say it was obviously a gift of grace. To forget the past, to remember to forget. Joseph remembered rightly. He doesn't treat his brothers as they treated him. He chooses to let it go. Now, I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking, but Engle, our text that you're glossing over, what about the part about the silver cup? That wasn't letting go. That was really passive-aggressive. That was a plan to get them thrown into jail, just like they threw him into jail. I don't think so. Think it through again. I think what Joseph did was set up a situation in the present exactly like his of the past. He's seeing if the brothers have changed. Will they do to Benjamin what they did to him? They could have abandoned Benjamin. You know, for all they knew, Benjamin did take the cup, right? And they could have gone home and said the same thing repeated to Dad. Benjamin's dead. Sorry, we lost him in Egypt. Benjamin brought this on himself. But he rises Joseph to imagine that I wonder if they've changed. I wonder now if they're better brothers now to Benjamin than what they were to me then. It was a risk. Just like Jesus' risky forgiveness with you and with me. Jesus has no reason to forgive us. He knows our story too. He knows all the sins we have committed. And yet we see time and time again in Jesus' ministry too, holy imagination of how Jesus sets us up again and again for forgiveness. A risk that he takes with us over and again, even knowing our limitations, knowing our disappointments and our injuries, knowing how they can shackle and chain us and hold to our present and our future. But he continues, Jesus, doesn't he, to always set us up, to go the second mile, to encourage us to love the neighbor, to love the enemy, to never let the sun go down on your wrath. Forgive 70 times 70, be the light. Jesus never stops calling us to forgive. So we, like Joseph, like Jesus, forgive. And listen well. We forgive not because of our past. We forgive because of God's future. And now, to the God who never slumbers or sleeps, to the God who knows all of your comings in and goings out, to the God who hovers around you to preserve you from harm, from a God who is always committed to work out the future he's planned for you, to our great and good God who holds all the world in his hands, including Jacob's world, including Joseph's world, including your world and my world. To him be praise and glory forever.